Welcome to the Breath of God. This is a YouTube channel dedicated to studying the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. Over the last 45 days, we've reached over 42,000 people with these Bible studies and the gospel of Jesus. Therefore, I've opened up a secure online link for giving. And I'm specifically looking for 3 partners to give $3,000 each to fund the ongoing operations as I dedicate myself to these broadcasts. Thank you. And today's teaching, to obey or not to obey? That is the question. This lesson is about 1st and 2nd Chronicles. These 2 books are the books of retrospection. Retrospection is just a big word to say look back, reflect upon the past, on the things that have happened and why they have happened. And these 2 books are a retrospective view of man's history beginning from Adam to the Israelites' return from the Babylonian exile in these 2 books. So 1st Chronicles is broken up into 2 main sections. Chapters 1 through 9 are a series of genealogies, beginning with Adam and going all the way to the exiles who returned back to Israel from Babylon. And then the second half is about the reign of King David, verses 10 through 29. So if you notice, 1st Chronicles is the 13th book of the Bible, and 13 signifies rebellion in the Bible. And if you study the number 13 in the Bible, you will definitely see patterns around the number 13 and individuals and events. So this book rightly begins with one word, Adam. Adam is the very first word of the 13th book of the Bible, and Adam means man. And this man rebelled against God and brought death into the world. Through Adam's sin, the many were made sinners. Through one man, Adam, came death. And we all die because we are sinners, descendants of Adam. Really wild. So creation begins with Adam. The Bible's really interesting. It leaves no room for evolutionary theory in it. So you're able to hold your own opinion about the origins of man, and there are many out there, but the Bible is very clear. The first man was Adam. And then you find these genealogies taking into account both rebellion and redemption. You see themes running through these genealogies, and you see God moving through the families of the earth, beginning with Adam, and performing redemptive acts and carrying forward a redemptive purpose in the midst of man's rebellion against God. So it's a story of rebellion, and it's also a story of redemption. And you can actually study these genealogies, and they're are very telling, and there's a lot of color in these genealogies. And then you have the reign of King David. So King David was the king who was the man after God's own heart. And you see David's rule and reign. He is an amazing man and an amazing king. In fact, he is the greatest of Israel's kings. And you see David leads with the heart of God. When he assumed the throne after Saul, there was a civil war, and the nation was at odds with itself, and they had divided. David's primary concern after the fall of the first king Saul and his son Jonathan was to unite the nation Israel, to mend the wounds of the nation. And then you see David begin to expand the territory of Israel and create peace and prosperity. You see in David the image of Jesus, the Good Shepherd, who said, "There shall be one flock and one shepherd." You see so much of Jesus in King David, in his actions, in his writings, in his worship. And Jesus himself loves King David. In fact, Jesus refers to himself as, "I'm the son of David. I come from David's line." And Jesus also says, "I'm the God of David." So, when you get over to 2 Chronicles, which is the 14th book of the Bible, and 14 is typically symbolized as generational blessing, which is really interesting because David's name in Hebrew is a dalet above and a dalet, and that equals 14. And we see we see such overwhelming blessing coming from the son of David, Solomon. And this is the golden age of Israel. The temple is built, the Shekinah glory comes down and settles at the temple, and it is a time of overwhelming prosperity. Solomon builds on the work of David. And the other thing you see too is that David also had a series of compromises with sin, and you also see that also carried forward both the good and the bad, and Solomon goes much further, and this actually results in the disruption of the kingdom, and they eventually go into exile. So you see the disruption of the nation is taken into account in chapters 10 through 36. And the crux of this book, I would say, is 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14, which is, "If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves, will turn from their wicked ways, will seek my face, I will hear their land and forgive their sin." You see this, "if my people," is the theme. And it's about worship. And when man loses God as the center and God's character in their lives, then what happens? You see the disruption of the nation. But then there's good news. God does not abandon his people even though they fall into deep sin. He disciplines them for a period of 70 years. And Jeremiah the prophet foretold that they would be under Babylon's thumb, in a way, for 70 years. And after 70 years with Babylon was complete, Isaiah foretold that Cyrus would release them to go and rebuild the city of Jerusalem, which would begin with rebuilding the temple. So, and you see this at the end of 2 Chronicles in chapter 36. You see that the word of the Lord was fulfilled. The timing, 70 years, which Jeremiah foretold. The person who would release them, Cyrus, was told to about 200 years in advance by name. And what they would do, they would go back to rebuild the temple. Because when God restores a person or a nation or a people, he starts at the same place every single time. He restores worship. So he restored the worship, and that began by them using their hands, their bodies, to rebuild the place of worship, which was the temple at Jerusalem, because he was restoring worship. It reminds me a lot of Matthew's 6:33, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. So when God begins to work in a soul, in a nation, in a people, before he restores them financially or materially, he first restores worship. And that's what we see here. And then the following book, which will be Ezra, will see this actually begin to materialize. So this was probably the book, or I should say books, that Ezra brought with him from the exile and shared with the people, because he was like, hey guys, there are some things we don't want to repeat. There are some things we need to be mindful of, and you'll see that in his book. And there's some things we need to get back to. We need to get back to the Bible. We need to get back to worship. Not just, half-hearted worship, but all in worship of the Lord. And this is what Ezra does, is he restores worship. So thank you for listening to the Breath of God today. And remember, his breath is our calling.